I'm very lucky to work for one of the most iconic directors of all time. I grew up on Alien and Gladiator. I can remember my father telling me about Alien for the first time, and he was watching it at home and looking over the couch behind him afterwards, and it had freaked him out. That memory sits, that memory sits with me. So.
But still, Ridley Scott's still very actively making films.
Very actively making films. He's turning 82. He has a film that's going to start shooting in Ireland and France in February called The Last Duel.
I'm Charles Merzbacher, and I'm the Vice President of the MPC, the host of this event. And I'm very, very happy to be doing the final session here today with Ryan Stowell, who's flown all the way here from LA. Thank you, Ryan. Who's representing Scott Free Productions. We can get sort of into your, I'd rather not give your bio for you. I'd rather hear from you, but it's safe to say he's been involved as a producer on a number of films. I believe you just said you've been with Scott Free for 3 years now?
Yeah.
But in that time, it's been quite a remarkable run of, particularly of productions that have come to Massachusetts. So we're going to talk about that because he has a particular vantage point for looking at production in Massachusetts. But I wanted to start by talking a little bit about what Scott Free does. Now, probably a lot of you know that Scott Free is the company that Ridley Scott founded. You can maybe give us the history there, but
sure.
Maybe do that just briefly. What is Scott Free? And what today is there a particular production that Scott Free is doing?
First and foremost, hello everybody. Nice to be here. Thanks for coming out. Scott Free was founded by Ridley Scott and his brother Tony Scott. And it actually goes back even further, back when Ridley and Tony were making commercials together. In Europe, they wanted a vehicle to serve as a platform for commercials that they were directing. And so they decided to create RSA, which is Ridley Scott Associates. And that's been around for about 50 years now. And that sits next to our building in West Hollywood. So there's Scott Free TV and film. I'm in the film division. Then we have RSA, which is our commercials wing. We have another wing called Black Dog, which services the music video division. Then we've also just brought on a short form content producer from Awesomeness TV that's heading up short form. As I know some of you were just in a talk about Quibi and these new short form platforms. So it's very diversified, and we're very lucky to work for, or I can say that I'm very lucky to work for one of the most iconic directors of all time. I grew up on Alien and Gladiator. I can remember my father telling me about Alien for the first time, and he was watching it at home and looking over the couch behind him afterwards, and it had freaked him out. That memory sits, that memory sits with me. So.
But still, Ridley Scott's still very actively making films.
Very actively making films. He's turning 82. He has a film that's going to start shooting in Ireland and France in February called The Last Duel. And that was written by a couple of Massachusetts natives. You might know them, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. So they are teaming up again for the first time on a script since I think Good Will Hunting.
Wow.
And it's the story of two knights who engage in the last official duel in France in the 14th century.
And I get to show off my film geek credentials by pointing out that Ridley Scott's first feature was The Duelists.
Correct.
Which is which he made sort of counter casting with Harvey Keitel as one of the British duelist officers, and a really fascinating film. So he's kind of coming full circle. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And Matt and Ben back at it.
Yeah,
are they in it?
They'll both be in it, and it's Adam Driver and Jodie Comer. So.
Yikes, watch that space. So,
Yeah.
but so that's Ridley Scott, and that sounds like pretty much a marquee film.
Yes.
But then on the other end, there's some very low budget, tightly, managed, smaller productions.
Yes.
A lot of the stuff that you've brought to Massachusetts seems to strike me as being in that relatively low budget category.
Yeah.
So is that a particular brand that Scott Free is developing or has developed?
Well, some of these projects that we started making in Massachusetts, it goes back to the way back.
He means the film.
Yeah, sorry, the film the way back. Nat Faxon and Jim Rash wrote and directed it. And my current boss, Kevin Walsh, had developed it with Nat and Jim, and they were able to get it independently financed. They initially were going to bring it down to one of the Carolinas to shoot, and then Steve Carell decided to come on board as the reason why the film was going to get greenlit was because of his foreign value. And he said, I'll do the film, but you have to move it up to Massachusetts because that's where I vacation in the summer. And if you can make that happen, I'm in. And so they pivoted very quickly, and they were able to bring production up here and go to Waterwiz.
So that's really the good experience of doing the way back kind
Yes.
of one thing led to another?
Yes, they had I was not on the film at that time. I didn't know Kevin, Nat, and Jim. At that time, I was still working at Sony Pictures as an assistant for an executive named Devon Franklin. But Kevin, Nat, and Jim were kind of the groundbreakers in Massachusetts as far as what we've done in the past 10 years.
And then let's just see. So then, way back, and we can talk about any of these that are particularly interesting stories in terms of how they got made. But Manchester by the Sea.
Yep.
Thoroughbreds.
Yep.
American Woman.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing?
Jungleland.
Jungleland,
Yep.
which is just finished. I mean,
we wrapped production last year in Fall River, and we just premiered it at the Toronto Film Festival in September, and we should be having some good news coming shortly on distribution. Hopefully, we're in negotiations.
So, what is there? Is there a particular production that you guys, because you have a whole slate of stuff.
Yeah.
You're not making the Last Duel with 14th Century Knights in Massachusetts.
No.
Darn. We can do anything here.
But
no,
you can do period pieces.
You
We
can.
just
I mean,
did Little Women.
And Back Bay was doubled as Paris for
Yep.
the Pink Panther movie way back when.
Yep.
So, no, but seriously, so are there types of projects in particular where you say, yeah, that'll be good for Massachusetts, or is it more just driven by crew and tax incentives and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a case-by-case scenario for Manchester by the Sea. I think it would have been very difficult to go
Shoot it
shoot
in
this.
San Luis Obispo.
Yeah,
It's
in
not San Luis
Austin,
Obispo
Texas.
by the sea. It's just
Yeah,
Austin by the sea.
Yeah, or anywhere else along the coastline that, Manchester and Gloucester, they have this, very, in the wintertime, what Kenny was trying to capture. It's very cold, it's bleak, and it was part of the aesthetics that Kenny really wanted Lee, Casey Affleck's character, to be going through about this guy who was forced to come back and repair his life at home when he's been away for so long.
Is it fair to say that for some of the time you were actually hoping for crappy weather? Because I remember there are those scenes where there's just sleet and it just looks like hell.
We actually had the good fortune of we came to Mass, and we started in prep in the February of 2015, and there was this massive snowstorm within the first 7 days that we were going to be starting shooting. But luckily, if you've seen the film or had read the script,
Sort
it
of
takes
slush,
place
kind of crud.
Yeah, and it takes place over several months.
Right,
that,
that's right.
You know, it's supposed to go from the winter to the springtime and the evolution of these characters. Lucas Hedges' character is, you know, once they're able to bury his father, and we were so lucky because it snowed about 7 feet, and then within 8 weeks later, it was, you know, normal New England spring, and all the snow had melted, and the weather gods were on our side. So we were really lucky.
And well, that's a specific case.
Yeah.
But a movie like Thoroughbreds, which I
Yeah.
don't know if any of you saw, it's sort of a dark comedy,
Yeah.
teen angst comedy.
Yeah. Hitchcockian,
Yeah.
psychological thriller.
Yeah, which we now seem to be specializing with Knives Out, which
Yep.
is also shot here.
Yeah.
But it is the logic there just that it works out in terms of dollars and cents? Or?
Yeah, well, that was written for Corey Finley, our writer-director, had written it for to be shot. It was set in Greenwich, Connecticut, and obviously having this very upper crust Main Street was part of the setting that he really wanted to have, kind of the people passing through in this opening montage, and but we realized that there was a better base here for crew. Crew is one of the big reasons why we've come back here so many times. Seriously, applause for the crew.
Yeah.
And it's such a big determining factor, because especially when you're doing films of this size. Thoroughbreds we made for under $2 million, which when I think about that now, I'm like, I don't know how we truly pulled that off.
That is amazing, especially a polished look. It's
Yeah,
not a gritty
yeah.
look.
But again, a film, you know, a film crew, you're only as strong as, you know, your weakest link, and particularly in making a film of that size, from the catering to the hair and makeup team to the location scout. If everyone isn't firing on all cylinders and have the same vision in mind, it's going to look cheap, or you're going to sacrifice dollars on a certain day because they haven't brought in their A game. So Kevin and I, when we came to do Thoroughbreds, we just said, listen, Kevin's from Wellesley, and he knew the area around Wellesley, and we thought Cohasset would be a great sheet for Greenwich. And we actually looked up and down the coast in Weston, in Situate, Hingham, and then we found this house in Cohasset, this monstrosity. It was, I think, 30,000 square foot house that this homeowner, Peter Roy, had at the time. I think he just sold it, I heard. And the house was supposed to be a character in the film, that it's this kind of looming presence that these girls get trapped in and concoct this idea to ultimately kill their stepfather, and it wanted to play a role in the film itself, and we weren't finding it. And then we come upon this house in Cohasset, and they wanted an exorbitant amount of money for it, because it really is like a soundstage. And Kevin was able to negotiate them down, and, you know, does your wife want to be a producer on it? Do you want to come to Sundance when we do this? And this is where you have to get really creative and put those kinds of things out there, because I truly don't think that film would have been the same without that house. It just really created an additive layer and texture to the darkness of it all that we were going for.
So maybe let me back up just a little bit here, because as we start talking about these films, I'm seeing how obviously there are these script requirements. Manchester by the Sea has to have a New England seaport town, something like the real Manchester.
Yep.
And then you needed this house to be a character. There's sort of a theme there.
Yep.
But you did, you know, there's a development process that happens before all of that,
Sure.
where, you know, and how does that, I mean, I have actually heard of people who went out to make a movie because they had access to a great abandoned hospital or something like that. But
Yeah.
I presume that's not the case here. You guys have scripts that you're looking at in LA. Where does it start? Are you very director-driven, talent-driven, script-driven? Do scripts just come over the transom? Or is every case different?
Every case is different. I mean, through agencies, you get submitted dozens of scripts every week by writers who are represented or not represented these days because of the
divorcing their agents.
They're divorcing or hiring their agents. So, so you have that coming in on top of, we have a book scout in New York who is tapped into the lit community, and he's tracking all of the new books that are coming out every week.
So that's one thing you got.
Yep.
Pre-existing IP material in the, let's say, books.
Yep.
That, they're looking at even in manuscript form to try to flag them for possible options, right?
Yep.
So you do that route. You've got agents who are bringing now. How often are the agents or the writers? If it's a reputable writer, I presume they can operate with just a lawyer representing them or something like that.
Yeah.
But do they? One hears always that there's this tendency in Hollywood always to bring a package. So
Sure.
it's a script with Matt Damon or whatever.
Yep.
Is that usually what you get, or
You can. It's funny you bring that up. There was an article in Variety, I believe, the other day talking about the rebirth of packages, of bringing packaged films or television shows, particularly to the streamers, as there's so many places now with Netflix, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Quibi, the list, Hulu, the list goes on and on. I certainly think that there's always an added benefit to having an actor or a director on board attached. It's more enticing for the studio or a financier as they kind of already see the house taking shape rather than just having an empty lot. But that's not mandatory for us.
So sometimes it is, sometimes
yeah,
it isn't.
sometimes
or
it
director
is.
also attached.
Yeah, director also. It really depends on how you want to position it. If a director, for example, is a writer director and they've written a script and they bring it in to us, we're possibly looking at a piece of talent that we want to go after and then go to a studio, or if we feel like the material is strong enough itself, along with the director and the clout that Scott Free has, as Ridley is very, very involved with the producing aspects at the company, then we could do it from that side as well. So, and then there's also another avenue where, if I read an article and it's something that I love, I tend to gravitate towards true stories, powerful voices, unique characters. So just an example is I found an article about a year and a half ago on Deadspin called "The Writer Who Was Too Strong to Live," about this incredible sports journalist named Jennifer Fry, who actually went to Cambridge and attended Harvard and was like the can't-miss kid, straight out of college and working for like the New York Times and Washington Post, and she just became the girl in the frat house. And unfortunately, she had an addiction to alcohol, and it was honestly one of the best pieces of journalism I had ever read. And I particularly gravitate towards strong female characters, and based upon that, I took it to an actress that I had worked with before, even before I brought on a filmmaker. And I had read it with her in mind, and I just said, I can't do this without you.
Did you bring her the article or bring
I
her
brought
a script?
her the article.
The article.
Yeah,
So
without any
right at
script
the
or anything.
ground floor level.
Because I felt so moved, and I thought it was so powerful that it was enough of a magnet to bring to her. And she signed on based off of that. And so from there, we worked together to find the right writer, then director, and then you put the package together and take it out to studio or an independent financier.
So a movie about a phenomenally gifted sports writer who's addicted to alcohol does not sound like a laugh out loud
No.
comedy or a summer tentpole blockbuster with superheroes coming to save her.
Yeah.
So I noted that several of the films you've brought to Massachusetts are kind of these gritty, tough-minded.
Yep.
I mean, Manchester by the Sea kind of defines that genre in
Sure.
a way. But there's a lot of American women. They're tough, gritty. Also, I mean, maybe this is a good point. We might want to just. It would be good to show maybe a little bit of the Jungleland. I don't know if we have
Sure.
a trailer. Do we have a trailer or do we have a?
I think it's just a clip.
Do we have a clip?
Yeah.
It might be just to give a flavor of it, because not everybody may have seen what we're talking about here. Is that
Yeah.
a good idea? We'll just show a little bit?
Sure. I
Just a
feel
little
like I'm
piece
on
of it?
Conan right now,
Yeah.
where you're, You want to set the clip up for us?
Yeah, you
Sure.
wanna say- do we need to set it up? Yeah, probably.
I'll tell
do,
you a
if
little
it's
bit
just
about it,
clip. Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
So
tell
this
us
is
about
Jungleland. You're going to see Charlie Hunnam and Jack O'Connell, who play brothers, and we actually shot this scene at the Wamsutta Club in their kitchen, which we used. It's in New Bedford, and
And the whole
we
movie
shot
is shot around New Bedford, Fall River.
Fall River, and then we did a skeletal unit in San Francisco and Reno, because it's their journey. They're trying to get out of debt for this one last fight that Jack O'Connell has promised to help his brother erase this debt.
Right, that's the kind of the
Log line.
the log line of the movie.
Yeah.
Right. So are we good? We want to
Yeah.
take a look?
Yeah.
All right, let's watch. I don't know if we can just sit here. I think we can.
Sure.
How you feeling?
Great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I feel great.
You know, we cannot afford to lose tonight.
Yeah, I know. How much is the cut?
Look, you don't need to worry about that, all right? You handle your business in that, and we will get a cut you will not believe. I mean, a win tonight could open up a lot of doors for us. We could change our lives tonight.
All right.
Come on, give me a little roar. Let me hear you roar. Oh, man, try to focus. Give me a little roar, lion. What, you embarrassed in front of the dishwashers?
Yeah. So
That's
so that, I mean, it's the fighter. It's gritty
Yeah.
stuff, and shot in a gritty part of Massachusetts, which I hear they were delighted to see you guys. They were very accommodating down in Fall River.
Fall River, Massachusetts is like Charlie Hunnam fan base 101. I kid you not, there must have been 100 people, every day coming out. We were shooting in the sweltering heat, and they lined the streets cheering for him.
Do you think it's Sons of Anarchy? Sons of Anarchy is his series
Yeah.
that he's
Oh,
best known for.
absolutely. And they were so respectful because when you're shooting in the streets, it's a lot of moving positions for the camera, and then the crowd's got to shift. And one of our key cast assistants has this great crowd control where he kind of makes them feel like they're a part of the shoot, because if they're not cooperating, we're not making our day. And I loved it. It was a fantastic community. It was great to have people come every day and cheer and make you feel empowered to tell the story. And that's that's one of the benefits of working in a community like that. Is it I don't know, it just adds a little bit of energy.
And you guys were using, I mean, the key thing is just like with Manchester, you're using Fall River as Fall River, right?
We were using Fall River as Fall River. Max Winkler, our writer-director, he had originally written this script for Texas, and he wanted to have this very Hal Ashby, last detail, HUD, Americana, two brothers with this toxic masculinity between them. And when the project was brought to us and we were talking about where we could make it, we just said to Max, we said, we kind of always say this to directors when they bring us projects. They're like, "Can we do it in Mass? It might be set in Fiji, but can we?"
Let's hear it
Yeah.
for that. We are loving that.
We just really love making movies because we have this great team that we've worked with on multiple films, and you know the quality of work that you're getting. You know the work ethic. I've worked a lot with Chris O'Donnell and Lisa Strout and Tim Graff, so it makes the process and the hurdles that you have to kind of jump over a little bit easier. And it's also, I'm from Connecticut, so I spent summers working as a waiter on Martha's Vineyard, so to me it feels like I'm closer to home when I'm here. And you're just, again, the quality of the product, particularly when you're making these smaller films, it's paramount to get every dollar, every day extracted. So Fall River, we suggested going to Mass, and I had never really been to Fall River. I had been to New Bedford before, but Max really wanted to find this town as a place where Charlie and Jack had come from, where there was a lot of economic plight, and Fall River was a booming town during the Industrial Revolution. Sure. I mean, textiles were one of the biggest things going for that town. And you can see it, some of the mills are still there, and we actually shot in one of the remaining textile factories, a place called Marrow Manufacturing, that still produce jackets and blankets, and so we felt aesthetically it was a good fit, and we also were supported by the community as well. So it was kind of an easy pivot when you just change some things in the script and go there.
So since we keep gravitating back to talking about production in Massachusetts, let's dive into that just a little bit. And then I do want to talk a bit about the distribution side of things, because that's so critical to making all this work. But and I'll leave a little bit of time for questions, by the way. So keep your questions, and we'll want to hear from you. But as far as shooting in Massachusetts goes, we are thrilled to hear that you are having such a good experience. And I even heard that you guys have exported crew from here for productions because you're so into the work ethic.
Yes, we went down to Alabama earlier this year and shot a film called The Friend, which is based on a true story from a Esquire article of the same name that won the National Magazine Award. I recommend everybody going home and Googling this article by Matt Teague. It's one of the most heartbreaking things you'll ever read, but makes you feel like you want to just grasp every bit of life that you have. And we decided to go down to this town in Alabama where this story was set, in the real town of Fairhope, but we were competing against a few other projects at the time. And so I talked with the other producers and our line producer, and we said, listen, we have these wonderful department heads that I'm sure if there's not a lot of activity, in Massachusetts right now, let's call them up and let's get them down here. So, we brought our key grip, our second ADs, our entire locations team. They've done multiple projects with us. Alex Berard, who did Manchester with us, An American Woman, and came and did this one as well. I think he's done Castle Rock, and was tasked with just impossible things to find in a state that he had never worked in before.
His normal stomping ground, right?
But again, they knocked it out of the park, and it also too. And this was an amazing thing when we left Fairhope. The Alabama crew, the local crew, said to my colleague and I, they said, this is honestly the best production we've ever worked on, best quality. And you love hearing that, because we treat the film crew like a family. And the product is only be as good as the person next to me doing their job as well. It's not just the producer or the DP, it's everyone. So we were really lucky to hear that, and I love hearing that.
I mean,
because-
to me, I can't tell you, and I'm not the only one in this room because I know many of the faces out there. It's sort of almost surreal to hear this because I remember the first MPC meetings and when we were worried about crew depth and we were worried about having enough people, and the thought was, and it was true initially,
Yeah.
was that when production started coming to Massachusetts a dozen years ago, it was the exact opposite of what you're describing. They would never bring the crew. The crew heads were never local.
Yeah.
The department heads. They were always. The department heads were brought in from LA.
Yeah.
And then everybody else, we kind of filled in the ranks, and there was worry about would we actually have the crew depth.
Yeah.
And to see what we've developed is it's just simply amazing to hear you say that you can actually export our crew, our department heads to other states now.
Yeah.
So is that thanks? I mean, to my thinking, that's because we have a tax credit program that works. Is
Yep.
that fair to say? Is
Sure.
that crucial to the whole equation here?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's work ethic. I think it's the tax credit that have kept people here working and kept the frequency of projects coming in. I know that Netflix has come in to film more, and our community talks as well. So from the LA side, when people are talking about shooting elsewhere and saying, how's the local crew here? How's the film community? Can we get access to this? How's IATSE? How's the Teamsters there? And that's a big thing to have, because when people hear positive reviews and say, oh wow, you're getting the best of the best, or you're not going to have to cut through a lot of red tape to get it done.
So if we're up against, I mean, obviously Georgia is still huge.
Sure.
We're up against Georgia, Canada, New York, Massachusetts. And I'm not
Yeah.
asking you to handicap each of those places, but
Sure.
if you're the guy in the meeting saying, why you're going to shoot, where you're going to shoot, what do you say? You say, well, Massachusetts has.
Yeah. Well, I think each state has its obviously the tax credit percentage. New York has a 30%, plus on top they have a 35 post incentive as well. They're all, I think Alabama has the same as Mass, which is 25, but they're capped at 20 million. So, but I think, yeah, and you're weighing all these different things. I think, what Massachusetts has is the diversity in locations as well, that you can go film on the shoreline and get the Cape feel, but then head 2 hours inland and get Pennsylvania or any other rural area you're going for. I mean, we shot the Midwest in Taunton for Jungleland in some storefronts. So I think having that diversity as well, and the casting too. I haven't even brought up local casting. That there's a tremendous wealth of great actors, local actors that we've worked with on productions over and over again that have delivered in these smaller, supporting roles that have done just an incredible job. So
I almost hesitate to ask you this because you have been so generous in talking about our state and all of us. Is there something, if you had a magic wand, is there something we could do better, or that we could, we don't have deserts. We can't give you deserts.
Yeah.
The Foreign Legion movie
Yeah.
is not going to happen here. But is there something?
that's a great question. I think if there were sound stages here that were, I know there are some but they're not
But
as
more.
accessible. If there were more, and if there was a community built around them that weren't way out, I forget where they're
Devon's,
located
yeah.
now.
I mean, it's
It's
30
tough.
miles out. Yeah.
Yeah, if there was something more central to Boston, I think that would really help, because you can do all these location shoots and shoot, and cheat X location for Y, as we've done quite a lot. But at a certain point, if it's a bigger production, you need to build. And if it's somewhere that they can't get, they're either going to take it to another state or spend the money elsewhere, not the production, but they're going to eventually build it elsewhere. So if that's one of the things I would say would help.
I'd love to see. I mean, I don't know if this is a factor in terms of your budgets. There over the last dozen years, there have been some talks about building stuff,
Yeah.
literally building in the seaport. Once upon a time, there was an initiative to do that.
Yeah.
You can just imagine, given the dollar per square foot price that things are getting for real estate right now in the
yeah.
seaport, that project didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because the value of the real estate, and so that gets to the cost of living and cost of everything in Boston is quite high.
Yeah.
But does that impact you guys? I mean, hotels, everything?
Oh, sure, because, when you bring even a smaller crew, you're having to house 80 people to 100 people, and if it's something downtown, that's going to be a lot more difficult than, working in Dedham or Brockton, where we did American Woman.
Yeah, well, I noticed a lot of your films do take place in kind of smaller towns and
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's easier to produce?
That's easier economically for us to do that. Just on the indie side, for a studio film, there's a lot more room for there's a lot more room for the luxuries. I would say, yeah.
Right.
Which I'm hoping to do. I'm working on something now that I'm. My goal is to come back with a big period piece here in the next few years. So yeah.
Yeah. We love that. I hope Little Women is a huge success, and then that
Me too.
fuels the demand for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, because I'm watching the clock, and I do want to talk about distribution a little bit.
Sure.
Because when you talk about these gritty dramas, you're singing my song. I love those movies.
Yeah.
I love them, but I mean, a movie like Manchester by the Sea does not make me depressed, because good filmmaking always makes me happy. But that's a hard sell. I mean, traditionally.
Very.
So what's the secret sauce to financially? Because I would imagine you have to have some kind of distribution plan in place before you're going to greenlight it.
Yeah. Well, I'll use Manchester as an example. That script was around Hollywood for a long time. Kenny Lonergan, who had done You Can Count on Me and written Gangs of New York, he was a 2-time Academy Award nominated writer at that point, was kind of trying to make his way back to the director's table, and had this wonderful script that Matt Damon was supposed to direct at one point and then star, and it kind of had multiple iterations, but no one was committing to it, and then finally kind of landed with Casey starring as Lee and Kenny directing it. And then the case was, how do you get this made? And we took it around town. Casey brought it to Kevin Walsh, and we took it around town, and people looked at it and they were like, it doesn't make sense financially. You don't have, Casey Affleck wasn't a bona fide movie star, and his international value, wasn't getting the numbers that a financier would need to cover their bet. And then we found this amazing producer named Kim Stewart, who had just started a new production company called K Period Media, and she wanted to make prestige films. And she read the script, and she said, "Okay, I'm in. I'm gonna roll the dice." And that's the thing, that she took a big bet on that, because I think if you miss on that film, you miss by a long shot.
Everything.
Yeah. And we were there at the right time, particularly when we sold the film at Sundance, that Amazon was looking to kind of, make a statement and plant their flag and saying, we want auteur filmmakers to come to our studio and make their films. And they paid for the film, and then they paid for the marketing and P&A to get it out there, more than you would normally on a film of that size. But I think they saw the prestige and the award season ahead, and I mean, it paid off for them.
For these low-budget indie films, and not all of them have a Kenneth Lonergan attached to them.
Yeah.
You've mentioned some great names, but they're not necessarily household names. is it important to have, do you have co-financing always so that you're sort of diversifying the risk?
Yeah.
Or does it depend? And is it important to have a sort of like a release strategy, or is it better to take it to the festivals? I'm talking about these small indie films like
Sure.
American Woman, something like that. Is it better to take it to the festivals and get that, hope that you hit it out of the park,
Yeah.
and then you get the Amazons to come calling? What's the
Yeah,
what's
I
the
mean,
right?
there's two ways to that. We've been very fortunate with the Kim Stewarts and Brad Feinsteins and Teddy Schwartzmans of the world, who are independent financiers who are willing to take these risks and tell these stories that are difficult. And when I say difficult, from the risk to talent ratio, because they're looking at these films, you take the script, and you say, okay, these three actors are going to get me this much money internationally. And then from there, they're subtracting that number from the overall budget, and they're figuring out what the gap is in the equity investment that they're going to take. And even on a sub $10 million film, there can still be quite a bit of risk, $1 to $2 million.
They may just go up in smoke.
And they go up in smoke, and it happens often that don't get into film financing if you have a weak heart. It's got to be something you're fully committed to. So you can either go the festival route and wait to see how critics react to it, and then a distributor wants to come on board, or if the streamers come in early and say, oh, you've got a great package, we'd like to take it off the table early and buy it from you now, it can be the much more financially responsible thing. But then you're talking about eliminating the theatrical release in one way or the other. And I was just talking before with Chris about how there's an article in the New York Times this week about The Irishman, and the National Theater chain is upset because The Irishman is only going to play in a tenth of the theaters out there now. And this is a Scorsese film, an auteur whose films have played for 30 years, 40 years, and they feel like Netflix isn't giving them enough of an opportunity to play them in theaters. And I mean, this is going to be an ongoing discussion for a long time, because what's better for the film? Is it more people seeing it at home with your family without having to spend $100 on popcorn and parking and gas? Or do you need to be in a terrestrial theater and having the experience? So,
I mean, one argument is, I'll open it up for questions after this question. One argument is that the theater has become a place for the blockbuster, for the sort of operatic film experience.
yeah.
And the home theater, because now we have nice big TVs, the home theater has become the place for the character-driven dramas and that kind of stuff. So does that make sense to you? Like, in other words, maybe it's okay that one of those gritty dramas that I like so much just goes straight to Netflix, because that's
Sure.
kind of where I can sit at home and really dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes, I think there is a good space for them to exist on the streamers. One thing that I think you do lose is if it's an exceptional performance and people talk about that performance, that's not going to happen as much
You're just at home
in the
talking.
streamers, because you open up Netflix or Hulu these days and I see 25 different titles of who knows what. So it's like, how do you pick through what you want to see and figure out like what's quality out there? Whereas usually in the theaters, if things want to make an Academy Awards run or a Golden Globes run, it's going in the theaters so that that critics can talk about it and film community talks about it, and then it's put in the race.
So to have that, there's still that feeling that the prestige of a theatrical run, where you get that word of mouth, you get the reviews in the paper and so forth,
Yeah.
that stuff still does matter.
I think it does, but look at The Irishman. I'm sure they're going to go for awards. It's going to play in the theaters. It's going to qualify. So Netflix is disrupting that model. It's just how do these things coexist? And that's the big debate right now.
You make a lot of these like gritty films set in like hard Massachusetts. Are you ever worried about that becoming like a cliche?
Another
specifically like Massachusetts as sort of home of the gritty, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've not all the films that we've done here are taking place in Mass. Like American Woman takes place in Pennsylvania. Thoroughbreds takes place in Connecticut. But I think we're very conscious and aware of not making the fighter over and over again, of the blue collar worker trying to make his way out fighting and boxing, and obviously with Jungleland it's has a similar tone, but we're aware of it. It's the reason why I'm trying to pivot to some different stories here. And people are aware of it too. You don't want to oversaturate the market where people see the trailer and they're like, oh gosh, Mark Wahlberg's in another Boston film.
Okay. Yeah.
So I guess, I'm one of many students studying film and television production here today.
Great, congrats.
One of my questions that I'm thinking is, I see all this amazing activity going on, and I have gotten freelance gigs and started to try to get my feet wet in there. But as, I guess, like, production in New England is evolving, like, how do you see, like, this community welcoming newcomers, and what are your suggestions for us?
For breaking into it?
Yeah.
It's a great question. I first and foremost, I think it's great that you're pursuing. I wish I had studied this in college. I had no idea what I wanted to do in school. I got fired from my first 2 jobs out of college, and somehow I wound up where I am today. Don't ask me how. My mother, who's in the audience, can probably tell you about it. But I would, right now, you're currently studying? Yeah. So I would take advantage of any opportunity of getting onto a film set, whether it's just finding out, through the Mass Film Office. They have a list of all of the productions, contacts, going to the office and saying, hey, I'd love to intern for you for free. Can I get school credit? Just to, an example of this was we were scouting in, I believe it was Taunton, and this kid ran out of the restaurant that we were location scouting. He gave me this big speech, and I don't know, he had a great energy to him. I gave him my business card, and I said, just reach out to us, we'll figure something else out. Like, fast forward a month and a half later, he ended up being kind of Charlie Hunnam's assistant on set. Fast forward now a year later, he just came down to New York and worked on this John Boyega film that I did in New York City, and has just gained a wealth of experience that I just think no classroom can teach you. I know there's, it's wonderful to study cinema, but if you really want to get into production, you have to get on a film set, and you have to be tenacious about doing it. And just networking, because somebody's going to need you. They're going to need help. They always need help, and it's just not taking no for an answer. It was the same thing that I did. I was caddying in Martha's Vineyard, and I ended up making a friend there who knew somebody else, and then I just kept knocking on doors until somebody let me in. And you probably have a great community within your school, an outreach program. So I would get in as early as possible.
Pittsburgh in particular has very good internship programs.
Yeah.
I
was just very nice, by the way. I appreciate your comments so far.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I was curious about your own introspective process when you're presented with a script or an idea.
Sure.
And how you essentially assess whether or not that idea or script is a...
Can everybody hear that? He's asking, what's his process? When someone's pitching him a script, what's going through his head? How does he process what's being proposed?
This is a great question. I think one of the benefits of Scott Free is obviously Ridley is known for these masculine event films with dynamic characters. But also, he is a filmmaker that loves to cultivate young voices. It's why we have editing bays there. It's why we have these big offices to have directors, because he wants the next Ridley Scott to come along. And, you know, so segueing into the answer is, we always don't look at just these big films like Alien. I particularly look at whether it's an article or a script, do I love the characters? And then I say, who's going to make this? Where does this go? And because if it's not immediately a genre film, then it's got to find its home at a place like, you know, Searchlight or Focus. We have a production deal, an overall deal with Fox, where Ridley's been for a long time. So anything that we go to set up, I have to take into them first, and if they pass on it, then I can go to the town and pitch it to the other studios like Paramount and Disney, or we can go to a financier. So I think it's just asking yourself, you know, do I like this? Is this something that I want to see? And then where does it fit in? And if it's not a theatrical, do I think it goes to a streamer, or is it the better play to go to a streamer up front? Because these films that you make for 20, 25 million that are horror or comedy or drama might be a little bit more difficult to make at a traditional studio these days, but Netflix is making them. So, you know, there's a wealth of platforms to make stories. It's just figuring out where exactly it fits in at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I have a question in terms of the real estate, and I know there's plenty expensive in Boston, especially in Seaport, but there are other locations closer or different. And I don't really understand the industry, but if you've got an Amazon or a Mr. Scott or whoever, why don't they, the businessmen, show business? There's a bigger word sometimes, business, show.
Yeah.
Why don't they buy or build a business, a studio, if they really want one?
Sure.
They get business out of it, and they can do, especially if they're producing a lot of product, control the content, be the landlord. Maybe they don't want to be in the real estate business, but if it behooves them, they have to do that anyway.
Yeah, it's
It'd be more profitable for them to control the product, and then they can make money on it when they're not using it. Why does that business model not exist in this city?
That's a good question. Because there are places like that. For example, down in Atlanta, Tyler Perry just built a massive studio for his brand. That are I can't remember how many sound stages it is, but it's you know, it's basically like the size of Rhode Island. And he has a brand that's built in that you know, no matter what the content that he makes, whether it's TV or film, he's generating enough where I think it makes the most sense to him to control where they're making these films and how they're making these films or TV series, using the same people over and over again down in Atlanta, as it's a big production hub. So I think it is a good question. It's just a matter of people wanting to plant their flag out here, and maybe getting that, you know, that figurehead to do it, because it is a big gamble and it does involve quite a bit of risk. And if the tax credit is in jeopardy, then do they want to build here?
That was exactly my wrap-up question, which is
Oh, good.
Which is that, you know, we're looking now at it's not so far off anymore that, you know, when the tax credit program was extended initially, they gave us a fairly long timeline, but it doesn't seem so long anymore. I think it's 2024. It's not far off.
Yeah.
What, from a producer's point of view, is that something to worry about? Do we, you know, how does that influence your thinking, and, you know,
Yeah.
How does that influence the talk back in the boardrooms where things
Yeah.
get greenlit?
Well, I think, from my perspective, films have a much shorter runway to get going once we're ready to go into production, whereas TV series, if they get up and going, something like Castle Rock that I know built quite a bit and had to have an infrastructure. If you're looking for these TV series to stay here, and they ramp up in 2021, are they going to be hesitant about coming here because they'll say, well, we're going
going
to
for a
make this
5-year
home
run or
base.
something,
We're going
yeah.
for a 5-year run, and all of a sudden we have to pick everything up and change locations, and now the aesthetics of the show are completely different, and they're not built on sets. Then I think that probably puts a little bit of fear in their minds, and also I think too that from my perspective, the tax incentive is something that goes much deeper than us getting money back from the productions. That the way that we spend money here is, yes, we have a payroll that we're paying local crew members, but you have to realize it's housing. We're going to restaurants. We're bringing on crew onto other projects in different states. We're creating tourism for something like Manchester by the Sea that I think they now have like a tourism hub up there, and that's a best case scenario, but that's even further down the line of benefits. And productions will go elsewhere. I remember when I first started working at Sony years ago, and they had removed the tax credit, or now it's a lottery tax credit in California, and I walked around Sony, which used to be MGM, and there were just empty sound stages, and the only people that were really creating movies there were Adam Sandler, because he never liked to leave his office. And but I just remember thinking, I'm like, gosh, back in the day when Irving Thalberg was running the studio 80 years ago, 70 years ago, every soundstage was filled. And now they're going to Vancouver and all these other places. So.
And Adam Sandler, meanwhile, makes about a movie a year here in Massachusetts.
That's right.
He likes to spend his summers here in New England.
That's right.
And we want to keep it that way. I mean, I hope we can. I think it sounds to me like what we're saying is, for the health of the industry, we need to get this credit sort of extended without a whole lot of fuss, because I think also the uncertainty is never good in terms of the thing you mentioned, that there's sort of a good rep now about Massachusetts back in the people who greenlight stuff. They hear good things. Yeah. And I think any kind of changing of the variables is never a good thing. And
No, and it really does. Like, it's a multi-tiered. It's a multi-tiered system that's going to be affected. That it's not just, I think sometimes people are thinking they're giving Will Smith a tax break on his pay, on his paycheck here, and that's not it. These are people paying their rent, that go to work every day, that work hard, they work long hours, 16, 20 hours.
And productions that are pumping money into the economy.
And productions that are pumping into the economy for hotels, tourism, restaurants, anything, any equipment that we buy, it goes on and on and on. And so.
Well, I think still, while that's a little scary to end on that note, that we have to fight that fight to maintain a healthy, the takeaway I get from you is that it's been very good news over the last several years, and let's hope it keeps going that way. We love having you here. We love having you.
I'd love to come back.
We love all the things you've said about us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.